Hello everyone, welcome to today's video on my YouTube channel where we will discuss the top 7 symptoms of bad PCV valve. What is the difference between PCV and PCV valve? PCV stands for positive crankcase ventilation. A PCV valve is an integral part of the positive crankcase ventilation system, PCV, system. It is also known as the crankcase ventilation system. What does PCV valve do in a car? The positive crankcase ventilation, PCV, valve is a simple system that introduces filtered fresh air into the crankcase. The PCV valve uses the engine's vacuum to pull air through the crankcase and reintroduce it back into the intake manifold system. It is also known as the crankcase ventilation system. The PCV valve is a one-way valve attached to the crankcase of your car's engine and removes unwanted gases from the crankcase. PCVs are one-way valves that allow gases to flow from the crankcase to the intake manifold. They are used to help control emissions and improve engine performance. The PCV valve works by using a spring to keep a diaphragm closed. When the engine is running, the vacuum in the intake manifold pulls the diaphragm open, allowing gases to flow out of the crankcase. The valve closes again when the engine is idling or not running, preventing gases from flowing back into the crankcase. A two-way PCV valve would allow gases to flow in both directions. This would not be effective in controlling emissions, as it would allow gases to escape from the intake manifold back into the crankcase. Therefore, PCVs are designed to be one-way valves. This ensures that gases can only flow out of the crankcase and into the intake manifold, where they can be burned by the engine. PCV systems have been used as an emissions control device since 1963. Before that, engines simply dumped crankcase vapors into the atmosphere where they contributed to smog. There are two types of PCV systems. 1. Open PCV systems. An open PCV system pulls in fresh air through a vented oil filler cap. This system works as long as the engine doesn't produce excessive amounts of blowby. When that happens, the PCV system actually pumps the vapors back through the vented oil filter cap and into the atmosphere. Number 2. Closed PCV systems. Most vehicles now use a closed PCV system that draws replacement fresh air from the air filter housing. The oil filler is sealed. This closed system prevents vapor reaching the atmosphere. How the PCV valve works. The PCV's job is to meter the flow of the vapors from the crankcase to the intake manifold. The flow rate of the PCV valve is tailored to the engine. In other words, it is application specific. If you replace a PCV valve with the wrong one, you can create excess flow or restrict the flow. Why do you care? Introducing too much outside air into the crankcase can accelerate the formation of sludge. Even though the new air is filtered by the air filter, it still carries moisture. That moisture combines with oil in the crankcase and assists in sludge formation. In addition, excessive air flow upsets the proper air-fuel mixture in the intake manifold. The engine computer expects a certain flow rate from the PCV valve at idle and cruise. If you replace the PCV valve with the wrong one, or the current PCV valve becomes restricted due to varnish, oil, or sludge buildup, the computer won't know that and the reduced flow will affect engine performance. The key here is that a properly designed PCV system should remove crankcase vapors at about the same rate they're created. Number 1. Excessive suction on the oil cap. This is one of the most obvious signs of a bad PCV valve. If you remove the oil cap and feel a lot of suction, it's a good indication that the valve is stuck open. When you remove the oil cap, you should feel a slight vacuum, but not excessive suction. Excessive suction is a sign that the PCV valve is stuck open. This allows too much air into the engine, which can cause a number of problems, including increased oil consumption. The excess air can cause the engine to burn more oil. Rough idle. The excess air can also cause the engine to run rough at idle. Emissions problems. The excess air can cause the engine to produce more emissions. Here is a more detailed explanation of why excessive suction on the oil cap is a sign of a bad PCV valve. the PCV valve is a one-way valve that allows gases from the crankcase to be drawn into the intake manifold, where they can be burned by the engine. This helps to control emissions and improve engine performance. When the PCV valve is working properly, it opens when the engine is running and closes when the engine is idling or not running. This ensures that the right amount of air is drawn into the engine. However, if the PCV valve is stuck open, it will allow too much air into the engine. This can cause the problems listed. Number 2, discoloration or film-like residue forming on the underside of the oil cap. This is another sign that the PCV valve is not working properly. The discoloration or residue is caused by oil blowby, which is when oil leaks past the piston rings and into the crankcase. When the PCV valve is malfunctioning, it can disrupt the proper ventilation of the crankcase, leading to excessive pressure buildup. This pressure forces oil to leak past the piston rings and into the crankcase. As the oil mist escapes through the PCV valve, it condenses on the underside of the oil cap, forming a layer of discoloration or film-like residue. The color of this residue can vary depending on the type of oil being used and the severity of the PCV valve issue. Number 2, discoloration or film-like residue forming on the underside of the oil cap. This is another sign that the PCV valve is not working properly. The discoloration or residue is caused by oil blowby, which is when oil leaks past the piston rings and into the crankcase. Number 3, whistling noises coming from the engine. This is a common symptom of a PCV valve that is stuck open or partially open. The whistling noise is caused by air rushing through the valve. Number 4, emission of white exhaust smoke. This is a sign that the PCV valve is allowing too much oil into the combustion chamber. The white smoke is caused by the oil burning off. Number 5, rough idle or misfiring engine. This is a sign that the PCV valve is not allowing enough air into the intake manifold. This can cause the engine to run rough or misfire. Number 6, increased oil consumption. This is a sign that the PCV valve is stuck open. A stuck-open PCV valve can allow oil to be sucked into the intake manifold, which can cause engine to burn more oil than usual. Number 7. Oil leaks. This is a sign that the PCV valve is not properly sealing. A leaking PCV valve can cause oil to leak from the engine. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms, it is important to have your PCV valve checked by a qualified mechanic. A bad PCV valve can cause serious engine damage if it is not replaced. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked the video, please like it and leave a comment. If you are new to the channel, please click the subscribe button.